Australian small businesses are falling behind in their tax and super payments, and they could face jail as a result. The Black Friday Cyber Monday sales are set to hit a new record for turnover, and people born in the 1990s have poorer mental health for their age than any previous generation. Welcome to Fear and Greed Business News, Australia's best business podcast. It is Wednesday, the 29th of November, 2023. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, after the show, you are speaking today with Nick Pachos, who is Chief Commercial Officer at Superloop, which is a terrific supporter of Fear and Greed.
Yeah, so Superloop is about the fifth largest telco in the country. They have their own fibre optic network. They also work with some of those bigger players. And it's all about how to make sure that, given what happened at Optus, the outage, etc., how to make sure that you have redundancies in place to ensure that your telco is doing what you need it to do and basically not failing. That's kind of where we start. And then we go into the economics of telecommunications companies and what Superloop's up to. Great chat.
Yeah, and given what has happened this month in the telco sector, it is a fascinating time to be having this conversation. That's coming up after the show. The main story this morning, Sean, small businesses are increasingly using unpaid tax and superannuation liabilities to prop up their cash flow. This is a warning from the tax office.
Yes, it's understandable, but it's a very, very poor business practice. The ATO has seen a jump in unpaid tax from the sector and yesterday warned it would be cracking down next year. The ATO's second commissioner, Jeremy Hirschhorn, said that more than 2/3 of the $50 billion in collectible debt is currently owed by small companies. The tax gap, the estimated difference between what the ATO collects and what it would have collected if every taxpayer fully complied, for small business, that tax gap is 13%, far higher than the 4.2% gap for larger companies. When companies don't work with the tax office, the agency can report debt to credit bureaus. Now, since July, the ATO has handed over debt information on more than 10,000 businesses with significantly overdue and undisputed tax debts exceeding $100,000, and small businesses are very much in the firing line on that.
And Sean, the comments came ahead of the announcement of a deal between Federal Labor and the Greens, which will criminalise the underpayment of superannuation.
Yes, this is where it gets very, very dangerous for small businesses to fall behind. Workplace Relations Minister Tony Burke yesterday introduced Greens amendments to the Closing Loopholes Bill in the House of Reps, along with previously announced changes to labour hire, casuals and the gig economy. The amendments mean employers who underpay super will face the same penalties and possible jail time as wage underpayments in the bill, which the Greens said was a particular problem for hospitality. Greens leader and industrial relations spokesperson Adam Bant claimed the amendments help fix problems that have seen workers' superannuation stolen, left teachers unprotected from being pushed into casual work, and given big employers the upper hand in enterprise bargaining negotiations. The warning bells are ringing for small business. Do the right thing when it comes to superannuation in particular, tax as well. Otherwise, you could find yourself in all sorts of trouble.
Yeah, there's plenty happening. Local markets, Sean, how did they go yesterday?
The S&P ASX 200 closed up 0.4% to finish at 7,015 points, though at one point it was up about 1%. It came back later in the day. The real estate stocks led the way and the consumer companies and financials also did well, not so the energy groups, and the tech stocks also underperformed. Among the large caps, Fortescue was up 1.5%. National Australia Bank was the best of the majors, rising 1.2%. Industrial property giant Goodman Group rose 1.3%, but energy leader Woodside was down 1.6%. Helios, the share price jumped 7%, the best of the top 200. It held its annual general meeting yesterday. Departing chair Jenny McDonald repeated that the board understood the frustration of shareholders after $2 billion was wiped from the company's value in 2 years, but she wouldn't apologise for it. Core Lithium was the worst on the day of the top 200 at least, down 4.5%. In corporate news, Westgold Resources jumped 3% after receiving board approval to expand its Big Bell project in Western Australia. And Imugene's share price jumped 10% after it announced it has been granted fast-track designation from the US Food and Drug Administration for the clinical evaluation of its metastatic advanced solid tumours program, which is work against a new form of cancer.
Yeah, that's got to be good news. Now, what's happening in international markets?
Iron ore prices fell further yesterday. Mind you, they remain at historically high levels. Don't feel too bad for the big miners. The fall yesterday came after the Chinese government stepped into the market to keep a lid on prices. We talked plenty about the Aussie dollar yesterday. Well, over the past 24 hours, it's pushed back above 66 US cents. It's more about weakness in the US dollar than strength in the local currency, to be fair. In fact, the greenback is trading around a 3-month low against a basket of currencies on the back of expectations that the Fed won't raise interest rates again. The price of oil is up a bit ahead of an OPEC Plus meeting later in the week. And gold is having a great time, trading at $2,015 an ounce. That's its highest level since May.
Why a basket of currencies? I'm sure I've asked you this before, but it's just such an unusual choice of terms for it. I mean, why a basket of currencies? Why not a bucket of currencies or a trough of currencies?
Well, I don't think I'd go trough of currencies. Basket, is that the collective noun for currencies?
I don't know. I mean, that would be a very kind of logical answer to it. You know what? But I'm going to start a campaign, a fear and greed campaign right here, right now.
Yes.
A trough of currencies. It just has a nice feel to it, don't you think?
Yeah. Well, actually, the collective noun is a treasury. I've just Googled it as we've been talking, a treasury of currencies, but it's more a treasury of coins or banknotes as a collective noun.
Okay, so just to be clear, though, my campaign for a trough of currencies does not have your support.
Yeah, it did before it began. Sorry.
Okay. All right, no, that's all right. We'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, Governor Michelle Bullock was speaking at a central banking conference in Hong Kong yesterday, and she said borrowers aren't happy with the Reserve Bank after 13 rate rises since May last year.
Not happy, Jan. I'm not happy, Michelle, as the case may be. Bullock said the cash flow channel in Australia works very quickly. And despite the noise about higher rates, households and businesses in Australia are in a pretty good position, but they are unhappy, certainly with the Reserve Bank. Now, part of the reason they're in a pretty good position is the savings buffer built up during COVID. Part of it is due to house prices rising again. Bullock said businesses were passing through higher wages and costs to consumers because demand remains strong. She said the Reserve Bank was now in a period where it had to be careful, and she wants to bring inflation down but not impose on the economy too much or push the unemployment rate too high.
Retail sales fell last month, pointing to a slowing economy as interest rates really bite household budgets.
Yeah, so following a big jump in September and a rise in August, retail sales were down 0.2% in October, with a drop in all categories with the exception of food retailing. The Bureau of Statistics said the downturn might be a reflection of people waiting to take advantage of discounts during the Black Friday sales events. Makes sense, I suppose, because clothing, footwear and personal accessory retailing fell sharply, and they're the products that did well in the recent sales. Turnover totaled nearly $36 billion for the month. Clearly, the trend line for retail sales growth is flattening, though. So that suggests those interest rates really are starting to bite.
Yes, and speaking of sales, Sean, the Black Friday, Cyber Monday sales are set to hit a record high $6.4 billion, largely thanks to heavier discounting than usual.
That's right. Steeper discounts were on offer to encourage shoppers to fill up their baskets. It's estimated that retailers discounted on average as much as 30% against last year's 26%, according to a story in The Australian. While many retailers kicked off Black Friday sales as much as 2 weeks early, the buying spree peaked exactly at 10 a.m. on Friday. Now, remember, of course, Black Friday, Cyber Monday are pretty much online sales. The top selling categories included clothing, personal care, shoes, and jewellery. According to figures from online retail platform Shopify, the average basket size across the Black Friday sales was $165.70, with almost 3/4 of sales coming from mobile devices, the rest from desktops. Australian Retail Association Chief Executive Paul Zara forecast sales for the 4 days of $6.36 billion, up 3% on last year. Now, Michael, I've got to ask, did you actually buy anything during the sales?
As a household, yes. Individually, no. I find it... I realise I really struggle with online shopping. I get very distressed trying to figure out where the best deals are and all of this. And I've discovered that when you married to someone who really, really, really enjoys that, I'm better
Hand it
to
over.
outsource it to her.
Yeah, now Jackie's in the same boat. She's very happy to outsource it to me. And I like looking for the deals. We bought, do you want me to know what you bought? We bought a new Dyson vacuum cleaner. Always wanted one of those.
Did you?
We bought sheets. And we bought a 1 week holiday to Bali, which I've got to talk to you about. Anyway, let's just leave that one alone.
Hang on. Is that leave? This is a nice time to bring that one up there, Sean. So, look, you know what? We'll park that. And it feels as though it may be slightly deliberate that we mention it now because there's a story about what's happening in the retail sector. We've got some major retailers, Bunnings and Big W and IKEA, are offering up to an extra week's leave a year in an effort to attract staff. Oh, what a coincidence, Sean.
There you go. What an excellent idea, an extra week's leave for podcasters. IKEA has agreed to increase more than 4,000 workers' paid leave from 20 to 25 days a year as part of an agreement with the retail union that also bans casual hires and enshrines offers to work a 4-day week. It follows Bunnings and Apple doing similar deals, and earlier this week, Big W reached an agreement to allow 15,000 staff to choose between higher pay or an extra week's leave, according to a story in the Financial Review. The Shop Distributive and Allied Employees Association says 5 weeks should be the new standard after raising concerns that Australia's once generous 4 weeks leave is falling behind other countries. For their part, employers want to rid the perception of retail jobs as transitory and entice more long-term staff in the face of low unemployment. Now, France, Finland, Sweden and Norway are among countries that require a minimum 25 days annual leave in addition to 9 to 11 public holidays. In Australia, we have about 11 to 13 public holidays, depending on which state you live in, and the 20 days annual leave. So I'm all for the idea of going to 25 days.
Look, we used to joke about you using this podcast for your own self-interest to kind of plant stories in there that might be relevant to you and to what you might be doing in your life.
So it's funny how this podcast, we've spoken a bit about the Australian dollar. We've spoken a bit about the extra need for leave. We've spoken about Black Friday sales, all which are particularly relevant to me.
Just a coincidence, I'm sure. Now, Sean, the share price of Collins Foods, the holder of the KFC and Taco Bell licenses in Australia, jumped nearly 8% yesterday after announcing strong revenue and profit growth.
Collins Foods operates 270 KFC stores in Australia and 72 in Europe, and that's where it's getting much of its growth from. Europe, where underlying profit was up more than 50%. Collins also has a growing network of Taco Bell stores locally, and yesterday said half-year profit had jumped to $51 million from $11 million a year earlier. In essence, KFC is doing well as diners choose affordable meals in the face of the rising cost of living pressures. The group said inflation remains a challenge, with labour and energy the most notable areas of cost growth.
Sean, Plenty's share price finished 65% higher yesterday after announcing a deal whereby it will co-brand loans for electric vehicles with National Australia Bank.
Yeah, so when you're a fintech, this is what you want. You want someone like National Australia Bank to come and say, we're going to refer customers to you, to Plenty. They're the customers that want to finance buying of solar panels and batteries for their homes. Now, when that announcement was made, Plenty's share price actually doubled within minutes. It fell back a bit. Now, the announcement also said that National Australia Bank may acquire up to 15% of the personal lender. Plenty Chief Executive Daniel Foggo said additional products arising from the partnership are on the way. For National Australia Bank, it gets Plenty's digital onboarding and fulfillment platform to assess car and renewable energy borrowers. The loans will be funded by National Australia Bank and held on its balance sheet. National Australia Bank is also doing a lot of the promotion. Now, NAB has done a few of these sorts of deals with startups. The idea is that it actually gets the digital infrastructure behind it all. NAB, along with Westpac, is already a funder of Plenty.
Yeah, we spoke to Daniel Foggo last year.
We did, yeah.
And it's a really interesting story about Plenty, about kind of where the idea came from and how they've kind of set themselves up really now for this kind of deal with NAB.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the thing for the major banks, they have these massive legacy platforms, And it's really hard for them to be nimble enough and to compete with their systems they have in place. So what NAB has done via Plenty, and then it bought, was it 86400 in 2021? That's Neobank, is actually use the digital platforms to provide much better service to customers, or at least that's the theory.
Now, I mentioned this next one, Sean, at the top of the show. People born in the 1990s and to a lesser extent the 1980s have poorer mental health for their age than any previous generation, and they don't seem to recover as they get older, according to a new study.
Yes, the mental health of Australians has been deteriorating since around 2010, and millennials are the ones driving the decline, according to the study, whose lead author is Dr. Richard Morris, Senior Research Fellow in the University of Sydney's Faculty of Medicine and Health. The study itself replicates what's been done overseas, but as far as I'm aware, it's the first time it's really done at such a scale here in Australia. Morris and his team analysed the mental health data of nearly 28,000 people for 20 years, from 2001 to 2020. According to a report in the Sydney Morning Herald, there's little evidence that mental health is worsening with age for people born prior to the 1980s, not the case post the 1980s. The study doesn't suggest why, but of course it's worth noting that Facebook was launched in 2004. The first iPhone had been released by then. Instagram launched in 2010, Snapchat a year earlier. The retweet function on Twitter had debuted, I think that was 2007 or so. It was rolled out in 2009. So certainly social media is thought to be a big part of this.
Yeah, I think that would probably make sense. Okay, turning to international news now, and there's been another agreement between Tel Aviv and Hamas to extend the current ceasefire until Thursday morning as more freed hostages arrive back in Israel.
The two sides will pause fighting for an additional 2 days, Qatar's foreign ministry said on X, while Hamas said in a statement that a deal was reached to extend the temporary humanitarian ceasefire for an additional 2 days under the same conditions as the previous ceasefire. The White House confirmed the agreement. Yesterday, 11 hostages were freed.
And finally, Sean, more than 70,000 politicians, diplomats, campaigners, financiers, business leaders, basically everyone who is anyone, will begin arriving in Dubai over the next 24 hours ahead of COP28, which kicks off tomorrow. Are you invited?
Look, I'm not. Are you?
No. Okay, thanks for turning that around. No. Okay, look, you know what? Neither of us are significant enough to get an invite.
And fair enough. I mean, the need for progress is clear. 2023 will almost certainly be the hottest year on record. Greenhouse gas emissions are still rising, and promises to cut pollution remain insufficient to take the risk of unmanageable warming off the table. At the same time, rapid inflation and global instability, think Ukraine, Gaza, have scrambled the politics and economics of the energy transition, according to a report in Bloomberg. The COP28 president is Sultan Al Jaber, Jaber, Al Jaber. He's also chief executive officer of the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company, and that has some attendees very uncomfortable. For his part, Al Jaber has publicly said he sees this COP as an opportunity to co-opt the fossil fuel industry into tackling emissions. Not everyone agrees.
Okay, up next is the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. You're speaking with Nick Patros, Chief Commercial Officer at Superloop, a supporter of Fear and Greed.
Yes, all about telcos, or particularly smaller telcos, and what they're offering, how nimble they can be, particularly around redundancies. That's very important for the sector at the moment, particularly given the outage at Optus. We all want to make sure that our telco is working. So we talked to Nick all about that.
Yeah, it's coming up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. And of course, today, Sean, is Wednesday, which means there is a new episode of How Do They Afford That out today. Today's episode, Sean, is all about Christmas, because Christmas is only, 4 weeks, 3.5 weeks?
Less
away.
than 4 weeks.
Look, it's alarmingly close. Look, no matter how many days it is, it's alarmingly close. And it's also very, very expensive. And we are basically, Canna Campbell and I are looking at different ways to kind of do Christmas on a budget and to still have everything that you kind of want, but just without blowing the budget.
How Scrooge can you and Canna be? Just enjoy it. Blow out the credit cards. Who cares?
See, you know what? I'm going to play this back to her during the next episode, because that kind of attitude is exactly what lands people in trouble come January. Sean, they just go, you know what? I actually ask that question. It's almost my first question in this episode going, is there just a temptation to go, you know what? Christmas only comes around once a year. Let's just forget about the budget and just cut loose and we'll deal with it in January. So I think I was channeling you.
Yeah. I love Kenna, and she's so good and she's so sensible about money. But sometimes she's so sensible about money. I know that's a good thing. Kenna, you are wonderful. And I listen to you and I take your advice. But sometimes don't you just want to break out of that discipline and just splurge? I'd like an answer from Kenna on that one.
Okay, I'll put it to her.
I bet she says no. She and Tom will be like, we don't do that.
No. Look, you can find How Do They Afford That wherever you listen to podcasts, and I'll put a link in today's show notes as well. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It is Wednesday, the 29th of November, 2023. Make sure you're following the podcast and please join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, X and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson and that was Fear and Greed Business News. Have a great day.